Hello, welcome back. Actually, I might flip the board here in this particular game. Today I want to talk about defending and what do you do when you come under an attack. Because I feel like this is an element of my chess that has probably suffered over the years, not as being as strong as maybe other elements. You know, a lot of us feel very comfortable when we're doing the attacking, but when we come under an attack, it's very easy to go into panic mode. It's also, I think, very easy when you are attacking to overlook resources, defensive resources for your opponent. That's what I'll do. I'll very quickly go through this material anyway. It's not going to be a particularly long video. So what I said in this article, I've written an article which hopefully will get published at some point. How are you able to evaluate positions is obviously important as a strong player, blah, blah, blah. What it goes down to, I got horribly wrong. I went horribly wrong in analysis recently. I mistakenly thought these attacking positions were just winning for white. So really it's about a misevaluation. Now in this game, I may have already shown this on my YouTube channel. I played against Max Turner in a tournament in Hull, the Weekend Congress. It was a very unique tournament actually because the round 2 got cancelled because the lights blew. So therefore we only played really a full round tournament, which obviously wasn't ideal for me considering I dropped a draw in the first round, which meant that when I played Turner, I ended up drawing the game, which you know, is a decent player. I think he's probably 2300 level, certainly played 2300 level plus in that tournament, more. You know, you could then, if you'd had another round after that, you could, in theory, get a situation where he might play somebody and draw, and then if I win, I then catch him up. But obviously, the fact that it's only 4 rounds meant I had to win this game. I didn't, so I came equal third in the end. I think he came equal first to Joe Varley. At this point, he played h4, which I thought was a good practical decision. And in the game I took on d4. I should might hide the moves. Which was a fairly reasonable move actually, taking on d4. Just a practical move. You're looking at, you know, when you calculate, you're looking at captures, you look at checks. Again, when you come under attack, you look at captures, you look at, you know, you go back to the basics. You try and work it out methodically, move by move. Don't panic. You know, don't put too much pressure on yourself, feeling you have to play perfectly. A lot of chess, good chess, is about good psychology. That's often been my mistake over the years. But in this particular position, after h4, so I vaguely thought, yeah, he might go knight g5 at some point. Although that can always be met with bishop g5. It's not an ideal situation. We kind of got that in the game when he took on g5. The fact that I'd never really have a free move for the king. Now, if I go play a move like h6, he might go g4. I felt that I might provoke him into the attack with g4. And then play the move g5 later on and then try to create some kind of attack that way. I wasn't entirely certain whether he would play g4 if I played h6. But it was something to bear in mind. One variation I vaguely looked at with a student of mine was the move rook fd8, which was a move that I strongly considered, just keeping the tension centre. And the idea is, in some situations, you can meet knight g5. You can also still capture, but you can also now meet it with the move knight f8 because I've freed up that square for the knight. The knight is a good defensive piece, as we'll see in this variation. So one variation, you know, you just often when I'm coaching, we're just going over variations. We're just kind of exchanging views, saying, you know, going from A to B. Knight f8 was a variation I thought about. Now I thought, you know, what happens if he goes full bore here and plays the move f4, which looks very, you know, cowboyish. You're going all in on the king's side, but it's something you have to bear in mind when you've got your queen buried on b8. It kind of feels a little bit away from the action, right? A lot of the action's on the king's side. If the queen was on e8, for example, you could, in theory, say that queen is involved in the defence, But the moment the queen on b8 is kind of out of the game, this is the sort of thing that slightly concerned me. But I wasn't aware of all the defensive resources. And I said, I said to my student, casually, well, if they play a move like h6, you're just in trouble because they take on f7. King takes f7 and then play the move f5. And I thought, well, this must be winning for white. Look at that, queen on b1 is going to jump into the action. You got moves like take on e6, you got f6. And I thought it was very interesting, actually, that the computer completely disagreed with me and said that, in fact, white is in trouble in this position. So I just get a glass of water. Try to hydrate a lot through the day. Been having these stomach issues recently. Get a lot of acid in my stomach, maybe acid reflux, probably from a bad diet. I eat a lot of processed food, which is not great. Yeah, I think processed food that can lead to a bad diet, which can lead to problems like diabetes, being overweight, heart issues, and potentially cancer as well. So not ideal, yeah. Maybe I haven't got long left, Anyway, going back to the game. But yeah, I feel like that's another thing that can often, when we're faced with an attack like this. So if you had this position on the board, I mean, if you've never seen this position before, I think you'd be very scared as black, right? And it's very easy in that situation to panic. And a lot depends on your mood. So if you're into meditation, if you're into, exercise, or you've got a good state of mind, you're probably more likely to respond to this situation in a positive way. If you're a positive person, I tend to be on the negative side. So in this situation, I'm thinking, well, they're threatening taking on e6. You can't very well take this because then they're going to take, right? And go queen f7, and then pick up the bishop, and then they've regained the piece to sacrifice, and they've probably got an extra pawn or two along the way. They've actually got an extra pawn here, and they've clearly still got a very strong attack. So a lot of calculation is process elimination. So I can eliminate taking on f5. So what do I move on to? Right, well, what is their threat? Their threat is to take on e6. Well, one move is to take on d4. This is actually the best move. And I think that's often the way you should respond to an attack, is look at forcing move, checks, captures, the basics, as I said before. The basics is checks and captures in your calculation. It's a forcing move. So it's forcing white to now show something. You have to show something, right? And if that bishop would somehow, if you could magically remove that pawn on e5, white probably would be winning if they already had this diagonal open. I guess because of this idea of the bishop is coming into the game. And the fact that bishop is somewhat blocked by his pawn e5 helps black, I think. So the variation is, okay, so white now has a choice. If you take on e6, it's actually not that bad for black. You can simply retreat the king. You don't take on e6 with the king, obviously, because of queen f5 mate. But you can, in fact, just come back. Now, obviously, moves like this look very scary at first sight, but where do they lead? Yeah, I'd still be concerned if I was up against a very dangerous attacking player, I must admit, even in this position. I know the computer says that black is winning here, but I would be a bit concerned, I must admit, because, we see this a lot online. I don't know if you play much online, but you get a lot of these hackers who just, they'll just go bonkers, and a lot of them are quite good players as well, which makes it even more scary. So I'm thinking a variation like this, defending the bishop, could be met with this, and now suddenly what is these two connected passed pawns rampaging down the board. That is very scary, but I guess you can defend the bishop in another way, right? I didn't really check this variation that well. I should have checked this variation a bit better. What does the computer say in this particular situation? Oh wow, yeah, rook c7 is that the only move? So if I go here, this is bad. If I go here, this is bad. If I go here, this is bad. Because I think you take on d5 a lot of these variations, yeah. But rook c7, again, you need to see this advance. Very, very tough to see. And I think this is why being a good defender is such an asset in chess. Because a lot of players will get to this position at calculation. Even strong players, very strong players, even I would even say a Super GM might get this far and they might stop. So I think there's two very important factors when you're defending. Firstly, be aware that there's a lot of resources in the position. Secondly, don't cut off your variations too early. I think the stronger the player, the more objective they are, the more they're able to just keep going with their calculation, and the more they're used to calculating long variations. So rook c7 is a star move, and that's really probably the key variation away, because actually the other try is f6 doesn't seem to get very far for white. So I think this take on e6 is a better practical try. I think if I had that position, I would take on the e6 and go queen f5, because rook c7, you know, once you see it, it's kind of obvious, but yeah, it's not that. To be honest with you, I don't think it's that obvious. I think there's a lot of ways that black could go wrong there. So the other promising try is f6. Now, if the knight wasn't on f8, I think white would just be winning here, because he'd have access to the h7 square with a queen. That would be bad news for black. But now black can just take and play a move like bishop b4, and the computer says that black is winning. Yeah, mainly I think because that knight on f8. So another factor when you're defending, have you got good defensive pieces? People say if you've got more attacking pieces than you've got defenders, generally the attack will go through. It's like a mathematical equation. However, we look at this position. Black has a knight on f8. What is white really attacking? With a queen on b1 only has access to h7, which is defended. The rook on f1 is attacking. Pawn on f6, potentially you could call that an attacking piece. So although white probably has more attackers than defenders, also now this queen is now threatening to come into the game. Although white potentially maybe has more attackers than defenders, in this particular scenario, I think black is basically just holding all the lines. He's holding that h7 square. If you play a move, ideally you'd have knight on f3 and the bishop on d4 already, so that you're threatening knight e5. But here we're a little bit slow, I guess, because I could play a move like this. So I'm intending bishop d4 followed by knight e5 check. Now I do think queen g3 is actually queen g3 is probably a good move, right? Because bishop d4, you have maybe even take on c4, knight e5, king e8 is possible. And then if f7, I just go to e7. So f7 check, I just go to e7. So queen g3, bishop d4, knight e5, king e8, f7, king e7. Although you do then have... No, you can't go bishop f2 because of... yeah, I've already taken on c4 anyway. Yeah, you can't go to bishop f2 because of queen g2, mate. So I think, yeah, a variation like this is probably going to be good, right? Although, yeah, the computer doesn't mind it. Like here and then just take. And then I think you're in trouble. I mean, you could play bishop e5, but then queen g4, it's not really doing it. Or bishop c5 check, it's also possible. Yeah, and here I'm just going to go king e8, and you're going to run out, you know. So I think a lot of defending is just about not cutting off variations. So that's one example. Let's move on to the second example. At this particular position, I was white against Tony Costa. He was a bit of a kind of a bogey opponent of mine over the years. And Tony is quite well known in, well, he's a GM, obviously. He's been GM for many years. I think he kind of grew up in the same generation as sort of Julian Hodgson, maybe a little bit older than Stuart Conquest, Hebden, of course, Mark Hebden, Keith Arkle, those kind of people. Joe Gallagher as well, actually. And Tony Costa ended up living in France. I think he got married to the daughter of a quite a well-known Hungarian chess player. if memory serves me correctly. But I don't think I've ever beaten Tony over the board. I came very close at the 4CL. Maybe it was a couple of years ago, and I was completely winning. And I got really irate after the game. When the game ended in a draw, I was really flustered. Because I knew how winning I was, and it was really a game I should not have let slip. But obviously the way I acted didn't really reflect very well on myself, and it was kind of a very babyish reaction. But I played this game in Torquay it was around about 2013. And it's kind of like in my kind of wilderness years where I think I'd kind of forgotten how to calculate properly. I mean, I'm probably doing myself a disservice because still quite a decent player then. Higher rated than I am now. But I wasn't really going after it, I'm probably working harder now than I was back then. I was just going through the motions. The deflation hadn't really kicked in. So I wasn't necessarily dropping a lot of points like I am now. There weren't as many like underrated juniors around then. I was still like in a period where I didn't really know what I was doing with my chess. I'd kind of slipped below that sort of, you go back 2005, 2006, I got up to 25-70. I'd slipped below that standard, got in the England team. So I was kind of faffing around, really, not sure where I was going with my career. I was kind of like in the wilderness, really. I remember playing a game against Fernandez, I think, playing that tournament, where I got very tired towards the end of the game, started collapsing after time control, had a good position, was winning at one point, had been losing earlier in the game against Fernandez. So I lost that game. So I think that knocked me out of contention. I don't think I played like David Howell or anyone. I think David Howell ended up winning the tournament. I think it might have been the year where Simon Williams and Mark Hebden scored 8.5, but they didn't even get in the playoff. So I think they were sharing like a flat or something at that time. And they kind of, they weren't really going out drinking. Like maybe in the past they might have been socialising a bit more. And that kind of inspired them. And normally you get 8.5 out of 11. I might be getting, there's so many Britishes that have been at Torquay, I might be getting my Britishes mixed up, right? But I believe it was something like that year. And Howell ended up winning it. I think he beat Hebden in the semi-Slav fairly early on in the tournament. And but yeah, if you get 8.5 out of 11, back in the day when he used to have 11 rounds, you normally 8.5 is like a massive score. You normally expect to at least get in the playoff. That year they didn't even get in the playoff because Howell got 9 out of 11. I think he turned down a draw against Gary Lane in the final round. Gary offered him a quick draw. He turned down a draw, even though that would guarantee him winning the tournament. But he went on to draw the game anyway. So in this particular scenario, I'm white against Tony Costa. I thought I've got a very promising attack. Even though I sacrificed a piece, I really like my position here. I thought I got all these threats like taking on d5, followed by knight f6. I think if he takes on c3 here, my plan was to play... What was my plan here? It was probably just to go here, actually. Yeah, this is my plan. Because if you take with a bishop, then I go here. Bishop e4. And black is going to get checkmated, actually. Yeah, he's gone to 100%. Because you go here, I go check. A classic checkmating technique. And then you mate. So you need the bishop on g6. So clearly you don't go queen h7 first, because then the king would run away. So you need that bishop on g6 so you can deliver checkmate on h7. So classic checkmating technique. So this originated from a Catalan. I sat in the, I should have really been sat at the board calculating variation fendishly. But I was kind of nervous, I thought I didn't have a very good record against Tony. I'd lost to him in a 4CL game with black. And I was really keen to get some revenge. I sat in the audience and I looked at the position which was on the demo board, and I thought, it started occurring to me, what happens if he goes rook e8? And as soon as I started thinking that, I saw his hand and he moved the rook to the outside. Oh my God, I hadn't even considered that moving my calculations, right? Which is very, very poor. I just thought, oh, that can't possibly work. So yeah, so then I'd recalibrate, and in this position I played the move knight d6. That was a really terrible move, and that was kind of responding a bad. So again, it shows you when you defend well, there's a few things that can happen. Often as well, it's often said that if opponents who are attacking, they're using more energy. So I remember Karpov was known to be a good defender, and he would often, even against someone as good as Kasparov, he would often beat off the attack and then win the endgame because they were too tired to put up resistance. They put so much effort into that attack. When it foundered, they had nothing left. And it's kind of happened here. I probably kind of didn't recalibrate. I don't think I was tired, but I didn't recalibrate after he played rook e8. It kind of put me on tilt. So what alternatives do I have? If I take on d5, it's probably the first move I looked at. Why doesn't that work? Yeah, I need another rook on a1. Yeah, this is the problem. I've lost this rook, right? So even though I got very dangerous looking attack, this just isn't working. My bishop doesn't have access to e4 anymore, and even if it did, it could go bishop g7. Yeah, and now I can't take. If I had a rook on a1, I'd be winning here. I could take on f6, but I don't have a rook on e1, so I've already sat the rook. So he went rook e8. I was like, oh my god, yeah, very, very, yeah. So I thought I was winning, and then he goes rook e8. I'm like, oh wow, hang on. Maybe this, suddenly I realised this is not so simple. So the move I think I should have played was knight f6. That was the best try. I should have done this. And I think Tony might well have just... I think he said to me after the game it was just going to like make a draw here. Because there is a line where white ends up making perpetual check. But I think I'd seen further and seen where he could give up the queen to carry on. And I saw that line and I thought that's why I ended up playing knight d6. So I think black in this particular position does not... Can they take here? They could take with a bishop, right? What's wrong with that? Maybe it's knight d5 anyway. What's the issue with that? I don't really remember the game, so... If I take on f6, they take with the queen, right? They must just be winning. If I take on d5, they go bishop g7. And if I go knight f6, I go queen f6. So what on earth did I have in mind after this move, for example? I'm struggling to see what my plan was. Oh, maybe it's bishop. No, it can't be bishop. It must be knight d5, surely. What does the computer say here? Rook e4. Yeah, I think I had this in mind, right? That sometimes I can switch to rook, right? It was played a long time ago, in fairness. Yeah, this is actually the key variation, because if they do this, you go here, and this is what you need to see. That black can give up the queen, and white doesn't necessarily have perpetual check, so therefore you're struggling. You're struggling for a draw. But I think, from what I remember, I was talking to him after the game, Tony said, because I think we ended up going to the Albion pub or something like that. I saw him later at the Albion pub with Nigel Pover. So there's an Albion pub across the road. The venue's like Riviera Centre in Torquay, right? It's one of the first venues I played when I played the British Championships. I think I played there in 1998 the first time. So the first year of Smith Williams, the first year I played the British was the Major Open 1996 in Nottingham. I played at Nottingham University. In 1997 I played in Hove, I believe. And in 1998, that was the first year they did Torquay. That was in 1998. Nigel Short won that year in a playoff against Matthew Sadler. I could be wrong about that. My memory of history is quite poor, but yeah, rook e4, and basically you end up giving up the queen. Yeah, and the computer says that obviously over the board you wouldn't be completely certain as black, because you'd say, well, here you know what happens if white runs the h pawn, but the computer sees that black is ahead here. But yeah, So the other choice after knight f6, which is the move I should have played really, practically speaking, that would have been much better, was to take with a knight, and I think he would have potentially just played that variation. Now the main point is you now go queen, rather than taking, which leads to just a dead lost position, because a move like rook e4 now, I believe that can just be met with something like bishop g5, right? No. Because of rook g4. Sorry. Maybe it's bishop g7, right? No? E5, yeah. So you see again, we've seen defensive resources, E5. So I've probably seen this in the game, right? I know I'm getting these variations all wrong at the moment, but I've probably seen that in the game that he had this move E5. And my attack runs out of steam. But the point is that you go check here, and I'd seen this as well. And I think we'd both seen this variation. I think that Tony was resigned to a draw at this point, because the point is I think you've got to go king h8, right? Because if you go to h7, I think you're in trouble because you take on f6, and now there's bishop e4 check. So you go to h8. Actually tougher than you think. And now instead of taking, which again leads to a winning position for black, because now he's got time for bishop g7 if rook e4, e5 as we said before, you go queen here check. And this is the important point. And they haven't got time to go knight h7 because of bishop e4, f5 you take en passant. So they have to go back to g8 and then you keep checking. So that would have been a logical way to conclude the game and make a draw. Instead, I'd seen this variation where he could give up his queen. I kind of panicked and played a move which wasn't really very testing at all, which was knight d6. So often it's kind of like, you know, what you call a replacement variation, right? And a patchwork variation. So when knight d6 and he played bishop f8. Tried queen h5. Pure desperation, but now he can take. I went rook e4. He took a very good move because queen e5 is in time with queen f6. And my position's falling apart. Take the rook on b8, but then I lose the knight on c3. And he just took, and then I resigned the game because I realised after rook e5, and it's quite an important difference now. He doesn't have to get the queen; he can just go king f8. So the position is just dead lost. So I decided to resign rather. I mean, I could carry it on for a few moves, taken on c3, but it's kind of pointless, right? So I was very upset with myself. But it was a good example, again, you know, of how many resources you have as a defender. Don't panic. There's one last one that I analysed with a student of mine, and it was a possible variation from one of his games. And the variation was, f4, and again it was a position we looked at, and I thought, well, white has sacrificed piece, and I thought white is surely winning here. You know, you're threatening to take on e5, for example. It just looks so scary for black. I just wouldn't want to play this position, and I thought this must be winning. But actually, my student pointed out that black could play bishop e3, and he had a better understanding of the position than I did. And actually, the computer says that black is doing very well in this position. Because if you take on f6, you just take with the king. And if you take here, well, I can probably just go back to g7, right? And moves like queen h5, I can meet with knight g6. You're not really going to get in very easily. So tough position to evaluate, but apparently bishop e3, a lot of players would panic. They would get to this position in their calculations and they would panic. So my recommendation for you for all this defending stuff, look at it a little bit further. Don't be too keen to jump to conclusions. You know, don't jump to conclusions. Remember that you will have a lot of resources. That's what chess is about. It's a complicated game. It's not a straightforward game. There's often positions where you'll have a number of resources. Look for those possibilities that you might have missed the first time around. and have a look to see if you got a very good defensive piece as well, like in that example, the Max Turner game where I had a great night on F8. So anyway, that's my advice about defending. I hope you found it useful. I certainly did. And look out for more videos on this channel, and please subscribe and so on. Yeah, I'm trying to build up subscribers, but it's hard because the problem is like YouTube is very competitive. I think actually I did have a YouTube channel before, and I very quickly built up a lot more viewers than I've had already with a very few videos. But now it's so competitive. Everybody tries the same thing. Same thing happened with Chessable. When I first got into Chessable, I had, I had a video course that sold really, really well, actually. The first one I did Sharp Middle. I think I made over $20,000 from that one video course, which is amazing. More than I got from any book that I'd ever published, apart from maybe Making the Castle King, which got translated into Chinese. But the problem is now that it's very saturated, and maybe they feel that my videos aren't of a high enough quality that I haven't been invited back by Chessable. The last two ones I did tanked, so I don't think I'm going to get any invites back to Chessable. So my plan is just to try and build up YouTube, and if I build up YouTube, I could maybe then get some coaching, or potentially I might get invited back to do some videos if I get enough subscribers. People think that I'm onto something. But it's a tough world now, the chess world. It's very competitive. Everybody's scrambling over a very small amount of money, and it's tough.